Well, hey, church family, Pastor Reece here. Last month, we had the great joy of getting to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of this church. And if you were there, I began to share a little bit about where we believe God is taking us over the next 5 years as a community. And when I think about the future, the passage that God has continued to bring to my mind is from Ezekiel 47, where an angel of the Lord comes to this prophet and gives him a vision of the future. And I wanted to read a couple excerpts from that chapter, starting in verse 1 to you. It says this: "Then he brought me back to the door of the temple." In the Old Testament, the temple is where the presence of God dwelt on earth. "He brought me to the temple, and behold, water was issuing from below the threshold of the temple towards the east. Going on eastward with a measuring line in his hand, the man measured 1,000 cubits, and then he led me through the water, and it was ankle deep. Again he measured 1,000, and led me through the water, and it was waist deep. Again he measured 1,000, and it was a river that I could not pass through. And he said to me, 'This water flows towards the eastern region and goes out into the Arabah.'" In Israel, the Arabah is a desert region of the land. "It went down into the Arabah and enters the sea. And wherever the river goes, every living creature that swarms will live. For this water goes there, that the waters of the sea may become fresh. So everything will live where the river goes." Now, in the Bible, rivers are almost always metaphors for the transforming presence of God. And so this angel says to Ezekiel, hey, right now, God's presence is contained in a lot of ways in this temple. But a day is going to come in the future where that unique presence is going to begin to flow out like a river over the entirety of the land. And I love that passage, and I share it with you because when we step into this next chapter, as we're doing right now, I believe this is what God is calling us into as a church, to transform from a reservoir of His blessing more and more into a river of impact for His kingdom. Because just like that temple church, we have been given so much grace as the people of Sound City. We have the gift of this building right here in the middle of this community. We have staff and leaders and elders who I genuinely think are unified and excited about what God has for us in the future. But most of all, the greatest gift that we have is one another. It's you with your story, your experiences of how Jesus has changed your life. You are the greatest blessing that we have. We are a fortunate people, and yet God has blessed us not so that we can keep these blessings within the walls of the temple, as it were, within these walls, but rather so that we can let them flow out, just like that river in Ezekiel's vision. It started with a little trickle, and then it began to flow a little more consistently, and then it eventually began to gush. And in the years to come, that's what we want. For us, we want to change from a reservoir of God's good gifts and release those blessings as a river over the North Puget Sound, because I think we're ready by God's grace in this season as a church. Wherever you go, you take God with you, because you are a little temple now, John tells us in the beginning of his gospel. And so over the next coming years, we want to do as much as we can to equip, mobilize, and encourage one another to go into the places we already are, to the arid and dry spots of our city, into hearts that need the one true source of living water. We want to go out like a river and take people to that well. So that's where we're going, reservoir to river. And in September, we're going to color that in a little bit more through a short sermon series that we're going to go into. But today, I wanted to just start with this. What's the first step in that direction? Where do we begin? And if I was to call us as a church to one thing, it would be to consider being a part of our first ever equipping cohort that we are organizing now and are going to launch this very fall. That's where this begins. And so I want you to consider if you or your whole family or just a member of your family might be able to be a part of this cohort where we're going to make the sacrifice of coming together for a handful of weeks in October and ask, how can we be more thoughtful witnesses to the good news of Jesus? How can we flow out as a river and bring life most effectively to the places where we already live, work, and play as a church community? So that's my ask to you, that you would consider it. And I use that word because I know not all of us are going to be able to be a part of it, but I think this could be a meaningful marker in the life of our church family as we come together this fall and encourage one another to go out more and more, so that next year, the year that follows, we'll be able to celebrate 2 or 3 or 4 times as many baptisms as we got to celebrate this past year. Right? Everyone is a gift, but what if we got to be a part of God's work in people's lives that brought them to the feet of Jesus? So that's the next most important step I think we can take as a church this coming fall. But I wanted to answer now a few questions that you probably have about this equipping cohort. So the first question you might have is, why should I attend? Besides the fact that you're asking me to, Reece. Great question. And I think the best answer is simply this. All of us, including myself, have people that we deeply care about and we desperately want to encounter the transforming love of Christ. And yet, sharing that hope in a thoughtful way can be really challenging. I think for most of us, it's not a want-to problem. We want them to encounter grace. It's more of a how-to issue. We don't know how to close that gap. And oftentimes, the church doesn't always do a great job. We say, hey, go tell your friends about Jesus, but we don't always follow through and equip one another on how to do that. Our hope for this equipping cohort is that gap will begin to close between the desire and the actual ability to live as a thoughtful witness. And I'm confident that if you walk through this with us, that you're going to leave more confident and even excited to be used by God to draw someone towards himself. Only he can change a person's heart, but we can be faithful to what he's called us to be. Okay, but who is this really for? And I ask that question because it can be easy to say, well, surely this is for people that have been following Jesus for 20 years. It's kind of Christianity 301, or this is for extroverts only, or people with the gift of evangelism. And of course, that's wrong. This is for everyone. Because the call to be a witness isn't something that meets you at the end of your spiritual journey with Jesus. It meets you at the very beginning. You remember what Jesus said to Peter? The first time he called him to himself, follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men, right at the beginning. And so all of us have the joy of being witnesses to the person of Jesus. It's not a matter of if you are a witness or not. It's just a matter of if you are being faithful as a witness or not. And so we want everyone to be a part of this because it takes all of us, extroverts and introverts, to reach the people that God has put in front of us. And this is for our younger high school students too, all the way through the spectrum. If you're in high school, I want to specifically ask you to be a part of this. Because if we're going to reach the next generation, we need you to teach us and encourage us what it's like to talk to someone in the high schools in our area, the colleges in our area, about the person of Jesus. So it's for absolutely everyone here in the church. How will this be different from other equipping environments that maybe you have been a part of? Well, I think of at least a couple of things. First of all, I want you to know that we are building and working on the content for this in-house. So this isn't something we're taking off the shelf. We're trying to answer the question, how do we be thoughtful witnesses in the North Puget Sound? And so that's unique. It's going to be something that we've hopefully customized, if you want to use that word, to reach people in this specific culture. But then the second is that this isn't an equipping class, it's an equipping cohort. In a class, it's mainly about information transfer. Let's tell you the right things to know and do. But we're calling this a cohort for a very specific reason, because we're going to match you up with a handful of other people that you're going to walk with throughout the handful of weeks and learn together, answer questions with one another, encourage one another. So most of this is going to come from a little bit of presentation, if you will, but a lot of conversation. And so hopefully those two things will make it a more meaningful experience than just pulling something off the shelf and recycling it in a classroom environment. So last question, are these equipping cohorts meant to replace our community groups for the fall? And the short answer to that is no. We are actually asking you, and we know it's an ask, to consider being a part of this in addition to what your community group normally does over the course of the fall. Because equipping cohorts, they're going to last for a handful of weeks, but your community group is where we hope that you are living in community year-round, and we don't want to harm one in service to the other. Now, you maybe in your group could say, for this October, our group is going to do this together, and that's great. 2 birds with 1 stone. But if you're having to choose between a healthy community group and participation with this, we don't want you to harm your core community here in order to be a part of this. But we would like you to consider, I want to ask you to consider making that extra sacrifice. With that, church, thank you for considering this. And again, I'm hopeful, and I ask that you would join me in prayer that this fall would be a really meaningful time in the life of our church as we seek to move from a reservoir into a river for the glory of God, because we believe that Jesus is the only hope of the world that can really meet us where we're at. Thanks, church. We'll see you soon.